This week on In Alignment, we're joined by Amanda, founder of Roots to Leaves, one of the most trusted voices in modern women's health. Maybe you know her from her Instagram, Roots to Leaves, which has amassed a loyal following as a go to trusted voice in the space. Amanda is a clinically trained practitioner who has spent years at the intersection of functional medicine, hormone health, and the mind body connection, combining advanced education with deeply lived experience. After navigating her own health breakdown post birth control and realizing how broken both conventional and holistic systems can be, she built a practice that now supports women through everything from post pill recovery to fertility, pregnancy, and beyond. But what makes this conversation powerful isn't just Amanda's credentials, it's how she thinks. We go far beyond surface level wellness into the real root causes of why women don't feel well. This episode breaks down the truth about birth control, why so many women feel lost when they come off of it, and the massive gap in how we're taught to understand our bodies. We talk about nervous system regulation as the missing pillar in hormone health, why doing everything right still isn't working, and how emotional patterns, stress, and disconnection from self are quietly driving so many physical symptoms. We also get into the overwhelm of wellness culture, endocrine disruptors, and what actually matters. The myth of quick fixes and why true healing is slower but infinitely more powerful. This episode will change the way you think about your body, not as something to fix, but something to understand. Welcome to In Alignment. I'm Annie.
And I'm Marissa. You were meant to find this today, and we're so glad you're here.
Welcome to In Alignment, Amanda. We are so excited to have you here today. So
Thank you.
everybody knows you on Instagram as Roots to Leaves. You've grown an incredibly loyal following. You are a go-to trusted resource in the women's health space. Tell us how you got.
Well, thank you so much for that. I really appreciate it. And I'll say it's been a long journey with lots of twists and turns. So I'll start off by saying that I grew up with food already at the forefront of conversations in my life. My dad's a restaurateur. I went vegan kind of on a whim at 15 and it stuck for a long time. So again, diet food has always been a part of the conversation for me, but it didn't really become intentional until a bit later on. In undergrad, I was actually studying communications and I had an internship, I think my sophomore year, at a dietetic private practice doing their marketing. And pretty quickly when I was there, I realized I was much more into the nutrition side of things than I was into the marketing. So that's where, again, more professionally, I made the intentional switch to go into nutrition education. Again, things kind of turned a little bit when I was in my master's. So when I was getting my master's done for nutrition, again, kind of on a whim, decided to get off the hormonal birth control pill that I was on for probably 10 years at that point. And I was just met with like an onslaught of symptoms, like incredibly, incredibly painful periods and migraines and breakouts, all sorts of gut issues. And I went back to my conventional OBGYN at the time being like, what can I do here? Like, how can I fix this or heal my body? And the response was like, welcome to womanhood. Like, this is what it is to be a woman. You can either suck it up or you can get back on the pill, essentially. So obviously that wasn't an answer that felt satisfying to me. So then I went to a more holistic OBGYN. That also didn't quite sit well with me because in that lens, there was a conversation where like all these things were pointed out that was quote unquote wrong with me while simultaneously giving me a list of like 30 supplements to take with no real direction of why I'm taking them or when to start them or stop them. And so that experience was the first that really highlighted to me this gap that we have, not just in the medical space, but even in what is considered more like holistic and functional. And at the time, I was studying nutrition. And so I think people hear you studying nutrition and they assume that you're a more holistic practitioner. But there were also major gaps in my education that was going on. And I'm super grateful for my education. I love my master's program, but never once did we talk about mind-body connection. Never once did we look at the body as a whole system or talk about food sourcing or endocrine disruptors or all these other factors that come in. So that's really what prompted me to do some further investigation. And that's where I completed some additional trainings in functional health. I did one through, I don't know if you guys know her, but Dr. Viva Ram. She's a pretty incredible OBGYN. So I did her year-long women's health practitioner training, did hundreds of hours of yoga and meditation and Ayurvedic training. I even did some like doula and CLC work. So it was really through a combination of all those different educational trainings, but also personal experiences that then led me to really found Roots to Leaves, which is my own dietetic private practice now, where we work exclusively with women. So I felt like that was an area that really needed support and explanation and empowerment and all the reframes, where we help women from post birth control or coming off of birth control through fertility, pregnancy, and beyond. So that's how I got here.
Annie and I both also have a story where birth control is kind of front and center of realizing, it put us on a path that we weren't otherwise on because for so many of us, we get put on birth control at such a young age. And when you come off, you're met with a lot of symptoms and no real answers. So I guess from either your own experience or your experience as a provider, why is that? What is the birth control pill essentially doing? Why do so many of us get off of it and then our health kind of like falls apart as a result?
Yeah. And I will say, I think this is an incredibly tricky topic. And I always like to say, I think the pill in many ways offered a level of liberation and autonomy to women that we didn't have before. And so it was an incredibly progressive and important player in our reproductive health. And at the same time, I think we can acknowledge that while also acknowledging that it comes with side effects and implications too, as does any medication. And I think the real issue comes down to the lack of informed consent that we see happening with the pill because we're putting young women on it that are completely healthy, right? So I'm not even talking about women that have severe pain yet or endometriosis, but women that are healthy that are put on a pretty strong medication that really shuts down their own body's internal hormones by bringing in synthetic hormones that essentially overrides it with no real quote unquote medical basis other than trying to prevent pregnancy when there are other routes or at least being told about what the impacts of it are before starting it. So, sorry, to more concisely answer your question, the pill essentially is giving you a higher dose of hormones that then tricks your body into not having to rise its own hormones up. So it almost like shuts down in some ways. This is a simplistic overview, but it shuts down your own hormones in order to prevent you from ovulating. And so without ovulation, you're not really having a true period either. So it kind of keeps you in this like steady hormonal state indefinitely, whereas off of the pill, our hormones are constantly ebbing and flowing. So it's a very different hormonal landscape when a woman is on the pill versus off. And the issue that we see happening is when someone comes off of the pill, that's even not even getting into the rebound effect, but when someone comes off of the pill, they have now all these hormonal fluctuations that are going on, or they have PCOS that's been hidden and masked and suppressed while on the pill that just now they're confronting. And I think that becomes even more complex when we consider the fact that women are on the pill for decades at a time and only come off when they're ready to try and conceive. And at that point, they're then facing what's actually happening in their body. So it's a super like, tricky and can be disheartening, I'd say, process that I think comes down to better informing women what the potential implications are of being on a pill long term, what it does to your body, and then trusting them to take that knowledge to make a choice for themselves.
Same thing happened to me. I went on it at 15 for really painful periods that required me to miss school. And I was just handed a prescription and I was on it for 10 years. Then when I went off, I did get a period for a year. Then when they came back, they were super funky and all over the place. Can we heal the root of hormone imbalances while we're on the pill? Or are these protocols most effective when we can see the full picture? Like, are we able to get the root of this while we're on the birth control pill?
Yeah. I smile because I come up against that a lot with clients too, where they'll be on the pill and they're like, I want to know what's happening in my body so I can better prepare when I get off the pill. I'm like, there's no way to know. There's no way to know because even if we do all the testing is picking up what the pill is doing. It's not picking up your own baseline, and we won't know that baseline until you're off. So again, I think if someone is on it for decades at a time, and I was just like you as well, I was put on it at 15. I was on it for 10 years. I was so excited to get off. I thought it was going to be this like magical, empowering experience where like I'm a woman and I can feel everything. And you're just hit with all these symptoms that seemingly no one can help you with or help you understand. But yes, I would say you have to be off the pill to really get clarity on what is actually even happening in your body. And then I think in the case of endometriosis or PCOS, there's another added layer there where the pill is being used as almost like treatment in some ways, where again, personal choice to decide to go down that route, but it's not going to be what heals anything. It is still fundamentally a band-aid.
You're seeing women come to you maybe for fertility. This is also kind of the stage of life that you're thinking about now as well. Do you think that most women are basically realizing these things when they're going to have a baby? And what does the process look like, I guess, in terms of rebalancing your hormones or preparing your body for like if you're healing for fertility, is that does that look different than I guess someone who's just coming off of the pill and trying to rebalance their hormones?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I will say I think something that's really missing in our care for women around fertility is the importance of taking the time to first support your own body before bringing in the fertility pregnancy part of it. Because what fertility prep really looks like, or what the trying to conceive process should really entail, is around trying to support yourself first, trying to make sure you have regular periods, that they're coming in a let's say 26 to 35-day window, that there is enough progesterone that's rising, that you know that your ovulation is happening. And all of that really requires the diet and the lifestyle and the more mental and emotional support that should be filling up your own cup first. So I will say, whenever a woman comes to us and they are looking to try and get pregnant, we always ask them, everyone has their own timeline, but we ask them if they're able to first give us 4 to 6 months of just caring for themselves, of just focusing on their body and getting clarity on what's going on and how they can really provide a strong foundation for themselves first, so we then have the capacity to sustain another life. I'd say that that at some point looks quite different for someone, but fundamentally coming off of the pill, it's still around supporting your body's detoxification from those hormones and then doing what we can to make sure a regular cycle is happening as well.
Most of the things, again, not a one size fits all question, but is there a general support system that most of us can use to help balance our hormones? Are there specific nutrients that are really important to incorporate, things that we should avoid from our environment, like endocrine disruptors, and maybe, a quick explanation of what those are? And then I would imagine that if you are dealing with something like endometriosis or PCOS, that it could be a little bit more nuanced what the right protocol is, obviously, that you're tailoring to your client's needs. But are there some basic fundamentals that we can all incorporate to set ourselves up for healthy, natural cycles and for fertility later on?
Yes, for sure. And they're not like sexy answers, but they're truthful, which is that in terms of diet, there's not a prescriptive diet that we really give anyone. With that, eating whole foods, and when I say whole foods, I mean as close to as how nature intended them to be, should really be the foundation for all women. That alone will be a fertility friendly diet, a PCOS friendly diet, an endometriosis friendly diet, is one that really is representing nature. And then we can get into the nuance of, how frequently is someone eating meat, or how much is dairy coming in? And that's where it's more, I'd say, case dependent. But I would say that one that surprises a lot of women is that for women who are trying to get pregnant, or women who are trying to support their hormones, full fat dairy, for example, is going to be a big player over skim milk. So little things like that, those types of intentional swaps can go a long way. So from a diet perspective, it's the whole foods. Um, from lifestyle, it's really around nervous system, I would say, more than most other things. Nervous system, sleep, and movement, but I'd say nervous system is the one that gets deprioritized the most. And we see it being incredibly important, especially for women and especially for women thinking about their hormones and fertility. So, especially with stress, because stress really is when I feel like cortisol has gotten all this attention lately. So I feel like most people have heard about cortisol now. When we are stressed, our cortisol goes up, right? There is a phenomenon called cortisol stealing, where essentially when we are stressed, our cortisol pulls from the building blocks that also builds progesterone. So there's this direct relationship that can happen between our nervous system and our reproductive system, where when we are stressed, our body will literally pull those building blocks away from our reproductive hormones to use them towards our stress hormones. Because our body is really smart and is primed for survival and is going to prioritize your safety over everything else. And so in times of stress, it's going to say, hey, we need to make sure that Amanda is okay and has energy and can respond and react to these stressful situations. We don't need to worry about ovulation right now. We don't need to worry about pregnancy. And so we see that happening a lot with clients too. I've also been in that position where we think that to care for our fertility, our PCOS, our reproductive hormones, it's just about the physical body. It's just about diet. But actually, the emotional body and the mental body play a huge role in what's happening with our hormones too. And we can't disentangle them. So that's more of the lifestyle piece. I can talk more about endocrine disruptors too, but I'll pause there for a second.
Do you know what I love about this advice is that whenever the advice for fertility, the advice for a hormone imbalance, it's really similar because it's essentially the advice for how to live well, how to eat healthy, how to be aligned with nature and the earth. And so I think what is mystifying a lot of people is there's so much noise in wellness right now. There's so much that's like, you need to buy this, you need to buy this, you need to buy this. But what you just explained to me is simply reducing a lot of it to the core pillars of like, is your body supported enough and safe enough to carry another, to create a new life? And that makes, when you think about it from that angle of like, how can I make sure that my system thinks it's safe enough to have a baby? How can I make sure it has the right nutrients? It doesn't feel as overwhelming, I guess. But I do think the nervous system stuff, especially, and we talk about this a lot at Shift, is everywhere on social media. People are using things like reset my nervous system, or I think that is still a little confusing to people. Can you talk a little bit about how our sort of emotional lifestyle, how those things and you explain the technical side, but I guess a little bit more about how women can be maybe more conscientious or supportive of their nervous system and their stress.
Yeah, and I love this, and I will say there is so much noise on social media, and it's, again, incredible that we as women have access to all this information now, some of it misinformation, but still access to information that we didn't have previously, and at the same time, it can be a distraction, and it can be confusing and overwhelming, and really, if we kind of strip it all down, the answers usually are pretty simple in terms of what we actually need to do. So, I will say from a nervous system perspective, to your point, there are, like, nervous system resets and detoxes right now. I know everyone was really into the whole high cortisol picture. I will also just say this side note, my cortisol flatlined, like, so low, and I think that's also what's not talked about. It's like it's not all about high cortisol. If you get past a point of high cortisol because of burnout, your cortisol drops. And it's actually about building back up energy and resilience too. So I think, again, considering that it's never a one size fits all approach, it really is about not just the person today, but their whole story that's kind of built up to where they are now that will also determine what their medicine is. The way that I generally look at nervous system work is less of a to-do list. And I think that's something that a lot of women can relate to is when we're so, especially those that are more type A, perfectionists, which again, I can relate to. We're like, okay, now I'm going to meditate for 10 minutes and then I'm going to go for a walk out. And it becomes like another thing to do. And we're not actually then embodying it. We're not actually living in it. And so I would say it's even less about what the thing is and rather how we can access stillness and peace within ourselves. And if that's through meditation, amazing. If that's through dancing and singing, because you haven't done that since you were 6 years old and you're like having a blast and that's how you feel in your body, incredible. But I think that the starting point for everyone should really be around what makes me feel happy, joyful, peaceful, easeful, and then growing from there. That's my take, at least.
It's such an important point because I think optimization culture is also everywhere on social media. And when these things become a to-do list, they're almost out of fear. It's like these things have, you know, seen that they've healed other influencers or they're a trend on social media or they're promising these amazing results. So therefore, if my morning routine doesn't check off all of these boxes, I will feel out of control. I will feel unsafe. When the irony of it is the most healing benefit you can get from these practices is the total surrender and letting go. Like, as you just explained, dancing and listening to your favorite song and just letting loose. Like, there's no optimization, there's no fear root in that. It's like this just total being in detachment from everything else around you and just like existing in the present moment. And it's funny because I mean, I'm totally guilty of this myself. I want to get to my gratitude, get to my breath work, but it becomes more of a to do rather than exactly as you said, an embodiment. And I think that you lose the magic in it. Like,
Completely agree. Completely agree. And again, the optimization culture, I think, really pushes us towards that, especially if like where it's getting more and more again noise around that today too. Something we do with our clients, one of the first things that we'll also ask them is like what they enjoyed doing when they were kids. And we can get so much information from that question alone. For some of our clients, we have them color. which sounds so silly, but just being able to sit down with no real objective, it doesn't have to look pretty. You can burn it if you want to. Like, no one cares what's happening to the paper, but also notice how you feel. If this is something that you enjoyed when you were younger, are you able to access that play and creativity now? Or are you getting panicky if you color outside the lines? If so, okay. But like, what is that telling us about how we're relating to the activity or what's coming up in ourselves too?
I don't think it's silly because it has recently been a really big shift for me. I've always kind of said, I'm not a creative person. I am not good at that sort of thing. And very recently, like in the past few months, through the work that we've been doing at Shift, I started writing again. And
Mm,
what I've realized for me, and I wear an Aura ring all the time that's always telling me my stress levels. And I operate at a pretty high stress level all the time. So I am working on that. And sometimes trying to force myself to relax is actually counterproductive. But doing something where I truly lose track of time and I get really into the present moment, that is when I'm actually able to find that calm. And I think, yeah, a lot of people think about nervous system stuff is just limited to breath work. But to your point, it can be kind of anything where you feel joyful, where you feel present and free. And I love that. But you kind of started in the more, I guess, maybe like more traditional medical lens, and you did Aviva Ram, which Annie and I are huge fans of her. And now what you're talking about, how has your kind of view on wellness evolved through all of that?
it's a great question. I'd say it's definitely been informed by my own personal journey, for sure. I will say when I first started getting interested in health, like I truly thought everyone should be vegan. I was such a hardcore vegan. It's like embarrassing to look back on. Um, and it was just a very like blinders on approach in the sense that I felt like I discovered an answer and I felt like that was the answer that everyone needed to understand. It should be applied to all bodies, all people. And there was honestly a lot of hubris in that I think, unfortunately, a lot of practitioners fall into too. Uh, through my own personal experience, through my clients' experiences, I'm so grateful for my clients. I learned so much from them every single day. Uh, and also through not I was like, not just symptom based, but also going through breakups, going through big and little T traumas and all these different moments in life where you see then how the physical body responds and you realize how interconnected those things are has really made me take a step back and kind of release my own ego in it and realize that it is so much more beautifully intricate and complex than what at least my conventional training had initially shown me. And also that there's not one answer for every single person. Every single woman has a different type of medicine that she's going to benefit from. And I think our job as practitioners, as coaches, is just to continue to try and guide that person back to their own answer. So I'd say that's the way it's probably evolved the most.
I love how you mention bigger life events too, like going through breakups or changing jobs. Marissa and I talk about this all the time because with Shift, we're trying to expand the definition of wellness outside of just well, skin health, fertility, but to include big life transitions, job changes, breakups, divorce, grief. Or also, I know that you've done a lot in the somatic space as well, but there is such an integration between your mind, your body, your spiritual self, your emotional self, and your physical self. They are truly all one. And I think that when we try to dissociate and say, these are like my life problems and these are my health problems, we're almost doing ourselves a huge disservice because we're not looking at the full picture of how truly interconnected they all are.
Completely. They are so linked. I really believe there is no way to disentangle the two. What's happening physically also will impact what's happening mentally. And I think we don't talk about that route enough as well. If we are in pain or have cramps or have estrogen dominance, that can also take a toll on our mental health. We can feel really alone in that. We can hold a lot of resentment towards our body. We can hold on to fear and that to look at that flow of things also. And then of course, to your point, the more things that we would classify as more mental or emotional. Like, I'd say a breakup is such a big catalyst for so many women, which is why I'm pointing at that one, or a big move or being fired from a job or whatever it may be. And then really seeing how that has a trickle down impact in our body and not ignoring that, right? Really allowing yourself to be a bridge between it.
When you guide women and you advise women on how to take care of themselves and build that toolkit, like, I think a lot of it is resiliency too. It's, you have all the tools in the toolkit from the foods that are good for you to the supplement protocols to the way to regulate your nervous system, the ways to lean into joy. And I think that as we go through life, that toolkit can evolve and change depending on our season, what phase of life we're in, and we can pull from that toolkit in different ways. But how do you empower women that are super busy or in really fast paced, high functioning careers or, while also navigating hormonal changes, whether that's a PCOS, endometriosis, coming off the birth control, trying to get pregnant without totally putting their entire life on pause? Like, how do you kind of integrate all of these aspects to build that foundational health?
Yeah, it's such a great question. Um, and I'll just say it's hard. It's hard when you have so much on your plate to then think about adding on something else can feel so overwhelming and feel even discouraging in some ways. So I'll say a couple different things to that. One is we are big believers in going very, very slowly. And as you can imagine, for women who are also high powered, incredibly efficient, determined, that bothers some people at first. At first, they're like, give me all the tools. Like, I want all the information. And we intentionally don't. We start very slowly because we want to make sure we build up your capacity and we want to make sure you feel connected to your why. And we want to make sure that we're getting really clear and that you're getting really clear on your intentions of behavior change, of shifting these things we're talking about, rather than just dumping a list onto you and saying, okay, go for it. Because again, if you're not connected to that why, that understanding of self, and you don't have the capacity, if you're exhausted, burnt out, have, an hour spare time in the day, which right now you're using maybe scrolling or watching TV to decompress, maybe you do what we're telling you to do for a few days, but after that, it's going to drop off. And so the sustainability and consistency part is so important. And so we go really micro. And I mean, like, add in a handful of spinach to your meals for like 2 weeks and do nothing else. Like, that's how micro we're going for a while. Because then imagine the confidence you feel and how excited you are at the end of the 2 weeks where you're like, yeah, I did that every single day. Done. Got it. What's next? And then we can start to layer on. Something's now become a habit and you've built up your own self efficacy. So you have the capacity and you have the confidence to now layer in the next step.
I love this because I do think once things become a habit, they not only become or automatic, but they also increase your craving to do more of it. But one thing that when I'm listening to you talk about this, I'm imagining who I was before I went down this holistic kind of. Now I'm so bought in, but I used to not be. And I'm thinking if someone's listening to this and they're listening to you say, it's a slow process, we do one step at a time. And they're like, okay, but I'm in so much pain and I have a doctor who can write me a prescription and I'm going to feel better tomorrow. Why should I do it this other way? Like, is my the spironolactone not just like now I don't have cystic acne, now I can go to school and not feel embarrassed or whatever, go back on birth control and not have this pain? I guess to speak to that person, and I'm not saying that maybe there's never a role for those, but like, why do it this way?
Yeah. So I will also say that we need band aids sometimes. I say that because I don't think there should be stigma or shame around those band aids. Because I will also say supplements can be viewed as a band aid,
Totally.
right? Like, depending on how we're looking at, or herbs too. Massages, body work, acupuncture, like, we can talk about all these things as also band aids. And so to also say that if someone is in severe pain, and I'm thinking about my clients with endometriosis right now, and also say, like, if someone has really severe acne, which is taking a really big toll on their mental health, band-aids can be helpful. And so there's no shame in choosing to take a medication. And we talk about this with our clients too. We have a lot of clients that are on medications as well. And it's almost like Dr. Ramoff also says this as well. It's like no pill without a skill, which I love and we follow as well, which is, and okay, we're using the band-aid. While we're on the band-aid, how can we still continue to care for what is at the root of what's going on? So that eventually, if and when you come off that medication, we've built up again the robustness and the understanding and clarity of self and the habits to sustain the progress that the band aid's been helping with. So I'd say one, it's not a rejection of that. What I will say though is band aids don't get to the root cause. So they're not going to be actually addressing what is underneath. The birth control pill can definitely help stop pain. And I don't want any of my clients in pain. So I think that's important to note. And at the same time, when you come off, when you rip the band aid off, the pain's still going to be there. And if your plan is to have children at some point, you're going to have to get off the pill. Right. So I think the conversation then comes in around if you want to use a band aid, yes or no. The answer is no. Also, knowing that this might be a slower process and that healing is not linear, but we can still continue to build up our tools and support system to make it as easy on ourselves as possible.
I think it's really empowering. Like when I went off the pill, didn't get a period. My OBGYN told me to go back on the pill if I ever wanted to have kids because I had PCOS and I needed the pill to manage it. I had horrible dermatitis, acne, eczema, psoriasis. I was given doxycycline and steroids from my dermatologist. Really bad anxiety, SSRIs for my primary for that. And then I went the functional route and I ended up getting a certification in functional nutrition and also worked with amazing providers and really self-educated and got to the root of it. And when I was introduced to the functional world, and I'm not just saying this, Amanda, your account was really pivotal to my
No.
journey here, but it truly was. It was so empowering. And I
Yes,
think
it is.
yes, of course, a pill that is going to solve things overnight. There is a time and place. Like, I will never diss traditional medicine. It saves lives every day. We would not exist without it. So, a time and place. But then there's this whole other world of modalities that when we actually understand them and take the time to trust and lean into their process, yes, it is slower. Yes, it is not overnight, but it is also foundational and transformative. And you can truly, truly heal from the ground up. But there's also this real empowerment on that journey, whether it's a handful of spinach in your meals every day for 2 weeks, or it's just sitting with yourself for 20 minutes in brain dumping, like doing like Nicole Sachs journal speak and carving out that time consistently. Like I think discipline in some ways has almost gotten a lot of there's been a negative connotation around it of like discipline is, hustle culture or harder is better. And I disagree with that. I think with the right intention, discipline in the form of self care is actually incredibly empowering. And sometimes that slower journey, you build something within yourself along the way that is really transformative.
I completely agree. I think that's incredibly well said. And it is true. I mean, I think there's also something that's very again, frustrating and disheartening when you are in pain, when you are suffering from an illness and no one is able to tell you why. And you go to countless doctors, and again, they write out prescriptions really quickly, but no one's actually telling you why you're bloated, why you have IBS, or why you're having painful periods, or it might be this, but we don't know why it might be this either and why our body was prone to that. So I think what is incredible about functional and integrative health is that it really takes into account, again, the mental, the emotional, the spiritual, and the physical, and looks at the entire person so that at the end of it, you can be like, wow, I understand myself more through this process. And there is something incredibly empowering in that.
100%. I wanna circle back because we talked about nutrition of it, we talked about, nervous system. I want you to touch on endocrine disruptors because this one can
Yeah.
be kind of invisible, but it's really important.
Totally. I love talking about endocrine disruptors. I think they're so fascinating. So endocrine disrupting chemicals are all around in our environment, and they are essentially chemicals that are interfering with our body's natural hormonal processes. So this can be both our thyroid hormones or reproductive hormones. A lot of them tend to mimic or amplify or interfere with our estrogen in particular. And I think what's tricky about the endocrine disrupting chemical EDC conversation is how prevalent they are everywhere in a way that previous generations did not have exposure to. The level of pesticide exposure that we have now, the everything from our tap water, I'm looking around my kitchen to be like, what can I name the tap water to the food that we eat to the plastics that are in our clothing to the cutting boards that we use at home, it is constantly overwhelming our body with these chemicals. And we have a built in natural detoxification system that is essentially our liver, is at the primary organ of that, that is there to help filter out these chemicals and these toxins, but we're just overloaded at this point. And so I think it's a hard conversation because we will never be able to completely eliminate these chemicals because they're all over. But with awareness and with understanding, we can one, support our body's, again, internal detox system. And number two, make really mindful and sustainable swaps so we can lower that burden on our body as well.
Can you talk a little bit about supporting our body's detox systems? I've seen out there uh, two sides. I've seen here's a liver detoxification protocol. And then I've seen people respond and say, your liver is made to detox. You don't need to do anything special. Where is the truth along
Yeah.
that spectrum?
Yeah. So, yeah, it's an interesting juxtaposition that's been coming up in the social media world. But essentially, yes, our liver is our body's detox system. So it is there to help us, again, filter out alcohol and chemicals and toxins, and it is working all the time. It also plays a big role in our estrogen recirculation as well, or estrogen, I'm sorry, metabolism as well. So it's kind of at the intersection of all these different things that are happening in our body. So we do have a natural detox system. Then also things like general digestion, bowel movements, sweating, our lymphatic system, these are also all playing a role in our detox as well. So we do have these incredibly intelligent bodies that know how to care for ourselves and that know how to quote unquote detox. With that, our bodies today, what we're exposed to today, is very different than what hunters and gatherers were exposed to, let's say, where, they're out in nature. There was no DDT or atrazine or glyphosate. There were no Lululemon leggings that they were putting on every day with all the forever chemicals or nonstick pans. So their liver was still a detox system, but it had much of a lower burden, let's say, to actually detox. In today's world, we still have that same liver, we still have that same internal system, but it's bogged down more, right? There's more work that it has to do now than it ever has had to do in the past. So again, a part of that is reducing that burden by being mindful of exposures. And these can be simple things. They don't have to be crazy, like having a glass water bottle instead of drinking out of plastic water bottles. Huge. One that I'm really working on, which is so hard for me, is not drinking hot beverages out of to-go cups. So tough. It's so tough for me, but I'm really trying to stay committed to it because I know it's a massive exposure as well, or it can be a big exposure. Once you see your pan starting to chip, right, being able to, at that point, maybe toss them and then get stainless steel or a cast iron. So little sustainable swaps to lower that burden. And then number two is, again, actually supporting our liver and supporting our natural detox system, which we can do with herbs, depending on how much support is needed, or supplements like milk thistle or knack, for example, or with foods as well, things like berries or bitter and dark leafy greens.
So my mom was way ahead of the curve on all of this. As you were
Love
talking
that.
about this, I had a memory of being a kid, and I hope she doesn't kill me for saying this, but I remember being like sort of embarrassed sometimes when people would come over because she would, well, we had no cool snacks at all. Um, I did like other parents had gushers and stuff and mac and cheese, and we had like oatmeal pancakes and
Um,
nothing. But the biggest thing was there didn't used to be cleaning products. So she made her own with vinegar and lemon and water.
mhm.
Smelled pretty strongly of vinegar, but this was like pre all the brands that do this stuff. And so I grew up around that. And even still, I find myself pretty overwhelmed today because it feels like every single day I learn something new is toxic for me. Annie and I have been talking about this lately, but sometimes it's like the stress of trying to be really well and the stress of worrying about this stuff can also sort of be like counterproductive. How much should we be on those small swaps? Like, is this sort of just life? Are there things that we really need to focus on, or how do you think about this for your clients?
Yeah. And it is a balancing act. I think this is true with the endocrine disrupting chemical conversation. I think this is true also with diet. There is a very intense, quote unquote, clean eating culture that's happening on social media where it's limit every single food dye, packaged product, seed oil at absolutely all costs or you're sick. So there's also this like huge fear mongering component that I don't think is intentional, at least for most people. But that is there that then all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, I can't take a step without feeling like I'm harming my body in the process. And that is incredibly stressful and overwhelming. So it is a balancing act in the sense that there are very real steps that we know and that I encourage and want clients and women and my family and friends to take to continue to be able to support their health. But that has to be balanced with the stress that it actually brings as well. Because anything that's bringing us stress is not bringing us closer to wellness either. So I think it really does come down to one, each person understanding, again, what their capacity is, what's accessible to them, and starting small. And so I talk about the small swaps, but small swaps over time add up. And again, it's not to say that we're ever going to be perfect in this or that we need to be perfect, um, but rather doing a little bit of an inventory of our day to day life and maybe finding one or two things. Like I told you, for me, it's the my matcha full daily run that I'm really struggling letting go of. But being honest with myself, where I'm like, okay, I don't need to be stressed every time I have it. I had it this morning. And also, let me see if I can bring my own cup tomorrow.
It is cool that they let you bring your own cup, by the way, because the plastic melting is in my mind now, and a lot of those places, like, you don't have to give them up, they'll just fill up your mug.
Yeah. And I think you get 50 cents off, I think.
Morgan.
That's what my barista just told me. I was like, great.
It is so true though. It's like if you can pick, for me, I overhauled clean beauty. So now my skincare is clean, my hair care, my makeup, and it's just automatic. I love the brands. It's
Yeah,
effortless. It's on autopilot. I don't think about it. So I feel like that's a really good tip. It's like, can you have one thing that you're trying to make the switch on? For you, it's bringing your own mug to get your hot drink in it. And then that becomes automatic. And then what can you add on? But I
exactly.
think one of the most overwhelming pieces is not just overhauling all of these changes, which you don't have to do overnight, but it's even knowing like what is clean and what isn't, because there's so much greenwashing. If you were to pick a few buckets, what would they be? From in buckets, I mean like kitchen stuff, water filters, clean
Yeah,
skin, makeup, bedding, food being organic. Like, what would you
totally.
prioritize?
It's a great question. These are all great questions, by the way. So I think something that most people don't realize is there's this big push right now on clean beauty, and how our skin is like our largest organ. And that is true. And it is important. I'm not discrediting anyone who's done the clean beauty swap. I've done it as well. But our skin also is built to keep things out. So it does absorb things, but it also is a protective layer. So I actually find one of the most effective and efficient ways to lower our EDC exposure is based on what's actually going inside of our body, which is food, because that's what we are truly digesting, breaking down, and absorbing systemically. So, from that lens, again, this really depends on each person, where they're coming from, what they have access to. But number one is trying, if you can, to shop especially high fat animal products. If you really have to make choices, high fat animal products as organic, grass fed, regenerative, pasture raised, because generally these chemicals accumulate in fat tissue. So, if we have to really put our dollar somewhere where it matters, I would say things like fatty cuts of meat or chicken thighs or even eggs, trying to make sure those are sourced really well. From there, then you can go into organic produce and as much as you can go in that direction. And then water filters as well. So that's usually like the first bucket I focus on. Second one would usually be things that we're rubbing in or absorbing into our skin. So again, more of the lotions, or say lotion probably the most, or perfumes, because they're sitting on us all day, over something like a face wash that we're putting on for 30 seconds and washing off. Right. And then after that, it's what's like the next layer is more of what is like laying on top of our skin. So at that point, it's the clothing. So we can really do this piecemeal. It doesn't have to be an overhaul of everything overnight. But I think starting with what we're quite literally putting inside of our bodies is going to have, or going to go the longest way.
Is that also, sorry, not to,
No,
does
okay.
that also include, like, feminine hygiene products, would you say? Like, would you put, like, tampons in that bucket?
Yes. Yes. I personally, clients do whatever they want. So I respect whatever a woman wants to do, but we try to encourage our clients to not use tampons for that reason. Again, you are taking a very vulnerable, sensitive, highly absorbable tissue and you're putting something inside of it. So it is very difficult to find quote unquote totally clean tampons, and pads can work really well. It's still resting there, but it's not the same level of high impact or absorption.
It's a really good question, Marissa, because it is internal.
Yeah. I've
Yeah.
been thinking about this a lot lately,
Yeah.
and
I will say on a personal note too, it's anecdotal. No, like science has backed this up, but for nearly all of our clients, myself included, tampons also just can worsen cramps
I knew
across
you
the
were
board.
gonna say
Yeah, it's just
that.
like too much compact and compressed, and like even just intuitively, just like giving your body some space to breathe.
I've been thinking about it ever since my friend, who was having difficulty conceiving some sort of surgery. There was some septum or something.
Okay.
The point is, her doctor advised her not to use tampons because of the basically while you're trying to conceive, like avoiding infection risk, the chemical
Yeah.
exposure, all these things. And then I was thinking, I don't really want infection risk or chemical exposure.
Completely. Totally. And I think that's what's hard too is doctors will start to flag these things when someone's trying to conceive. And I understand why, because they're also thinking about um, how there's a higher level of risk that's now involved. So I understand. But if we could try and get those conversations happening way earlier, because I think most women would agree, like, "Oh, I don't want to risk myself to these things either. Like, if there is another option, especially if it's as simple as pads to tampons, why not try that? If you need to use it for a yoga class, like fine, or a workout class, fine. But day to day, when we're walking around or sitting at a desk, yeah.
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 Totally. It's funny because Lauren Bosnick said that on a podcast like 5 years ago, and I was like, "You are crazy, like, this craft." And then I started doing it a few years ago, and it's so true. It
Oh,
really
yeah,
reduces your cramps. It's also, like, freeing. I'm like, I don't
totally.
wanna be more uncomfortable.
Totally. I just did a Substack on the menstrual cycle and I went down a whole rabbit hole of like free bleeding. I'm like, I'm not quite there yet. I think that would really alarm like my New York City family if I started just like walking around with a trail of blood. But I will say that I'm like 100% past this point. I don't remember the last time I used a tampon because it's for that conversation we were just having earlier around exposure. But also it's just now it's just uncomfortable and I'm so acutely aware whenever I use one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Our bodies are always trying to push out something that isn't supposed to be there. Like anything that you have inside of you anywhere, your body's whole job is to get rid of that. And so that's why I think it
Right.
impacts us,
It's
is like
really
your
Completely.
yeah.
Completely agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, the body's so cool. It's I mean, especially women's bodies, not to discredit men, but our bodies are just so incredibly intelligent. It's incredible.
Always
there's
trying to bring us back to balance too. They're working with us, not against us.
For sure. So just for a moment to quickly talk about the fear, a question that I often go back to for myself and that we talk about with clients also, especially when we're feeling overwhelmed by all these different health choices that we can be making, whether it's meditation or eating a certain way or clean beauty or kitchen products is I often like root in and I try and ask like, is this an action out of love or out of fear? And it's a very simple question, but it's just an intentional moment to really anchor into what the why is or the motivating force behind an action. Because the actions can actually look the same, but it's the energy that's behind it that shifts everything. So I often say, if what would be a good example here? Going to work out, you know, am I doing this out of love for myself? Because I really know my body will feel best if I move it. I know that it will be supportive and nourishing in a really kind of soul filling way to get to a dance class or to lift weights or whatever it may be. Or am I going to this class out of fear because I feel like my body needs to be smaller or I need to fit a certain ideal or I feel like I need to burn off a meal? Right. So regardless of whether you go to the workout class or not, the intention or feeling behind it shifts the entire relationship to everything. So a simple question, but it can go a really long way, even in these conversations of I swapping out my lipstick for a non-toxic one because I'm so fearful and this feels so urgent and so anxiety inducing? Or is it because I've intentionally brought in or understood this information and now I want to make an intentional and supportive choice for myself that's out of care for me?
I love that. That has been the biggest change in my personal life because a lot of the habits and things that I'm doing look really similar to when I was a little bit younger, but my mindset has shifted from being my own drill sergeant to being like, you have to do this. If you don't, you're lazy. Like you're not missing that workout. Like the conversation in my head was so aggressive and mean. And it led to me feeling really, really stressed. And even food, it was like, you have to eat a certain way. It was almost like punishing or something. And when you kind of flip it into what movement would feel really good today, like, how can I move my body because it'll feel so nice and lovely? Or like, I'm going to feed myself these whole foods because I really genuinely like care about myself and I want to take care of myself. It not only becomes so much easier, but it becomes easier, more enjoyable, and it lands better in the body because my diet Annie and I talk about this all the time. I used to have a much cleaner diet, meaning I was like really limiting a lot of foods. Now I eat still well, but I'll have pizza, I'll have cake if it's there and I want it, you know? And my gut issues are better now than they were then. My skin issues are better now than they were then. And I think it's the stress and that mentality that actually almost like cancels out all of like the on paper good for you stuff, if that makes sense.
Completely, completely. And I think we underestimate the role of that as well. We underestimate how the stress that we hold on to or the stories that we tell ourselves, how they will really impact how the body is feeling and responding to these interventions. We could be doing everything right, right, and still not in a well body as a result.
And I think on the flip side too, I think that these certain protocols might be the wrong word, but eating a certain way or following a specific regimen, I think it's food is incredibly medicinal. And there's, like, a time and place to, like, not rein it in more, but to dial in your diet or really use food for healing. But I would agree with you that if we do it out of fear, it almost keeps us stuck because 'cause we're, like, clinging to something external in hopes that it's gonna save us. But if we look at it as, like, a really supportive tool and not like we're restricting ourselves, but this is a form of self-respect. I'm honoring my body. I'm, like, giving it all of the building blocks and nutrients to support it on this journey because I believe in it and I wanna,
Right.
really give it everything that it deserves. It flips that entire narrative, and it can change your entire experience. Is that
Completely.
you do that work with your clients a lot? Because I can imagine that with the approach that you have that is so holistic and so rooted in food and supplements and self-care practices, there are definitely times in women's lives that require a little bit more, not rigidity, I don't know what the right word for it is, but
Yeah.
maybe less balance for a short period of time to really try and heal. But I would imagine that the narrative around it is coming from more love than fear.
Yeah, and again, I think it's going back to what we were saying earlier, which is there's really not a one size fits all approach to any of this. And you can have someone who is maybe in the process of healing from an eating disorder, working through the fear of a cookie and feeling joy again from having the chocolate chip cookie that she grew up eating is so important. Having that flexibility, even if the cookie has regular sugar and white flour and I don't even know what else is in a cookie. I don't make them too often, but like vegetable oil or butter, whatever it may be, all the things, all the things. That's going to be that woman's medicine. Versus, let's say, someone who's really turning to that very same cookie, but as a form of emotional comfort and has really used that as a coping tool in many ways. At that point, a different conversation is going to be coming in, a different relationship with the cookie is going to be established, and that's going to be her medicine, right? And that's where we talk a lot about the gap with our clients, where it really is this moment in time. It could be a breath, it could be 5 minutes, but creating a little bit of separation between our thoughts and our actions. Because most of us go through our days on autopilot, right? We have a thought and we do an action right away from it. And it can be really helpful and empowering and offer clarity of ourselves to be able to create a little bit of distance between those things. So we'll use a second example of a woman, let's say, that has really been turning to food as emotional comfort, right? To be able to create a little bit of a break, a little bit of a gap distance between whatever emotion is coming up that is then leading to that behavior, right? And if we can create that gap, and that, by the way, that can be done with literally like, okay, let me just breath. It can be done for some people by changing environments. They go for a walk. They get out of where they currently are. It could be interrupting the thought. I mean, there's like the age old, which we don't use, but the age old like rubber band therapy that people used to do. Again, we're not doing that. But there are all these different ways and all these different practices and modalities of creating this interruption. And then in that gap, can we take a moment to dialogue with ourselves and just ask, what am I feeling right now? Like what's coming up? And just listening and seeing if we have an answer. If we get an answer, there's a whole other conversation we can have with like the sabotager or the protector or whatever voice you or whatever label you want to put on that voice. Maybe the answer is no. And the only thing that we're working towards right now is just creating that gap and just getting comfortable enough to ask a question, even if we can't even listen to the answer yet. So that's how we go about it.
I love that. We talk a lot about the gap too, and one of the things that we talk about is the fact that the emotion that comes up is pretty short. If you stay with that emotion and just witness it and allow it to pass, it rises, it falls, it moves through. But what kind of keeps us stuck is actually our reaction and feeding I don't mean literally, it could be literally feeding it, but it's the stories that we create and the actions that we take that kind of let those emotions take us away. And so the gap also allows you to create the space just to let it pass even, because a lot of times it will.
For sure. And removing that urgency. I think our emotions tell us that something is urgent, that it needs to be taken care of right away. Because, I mean, it makes sense as a human. Our whole body, our survival is primed to keep us out of discomfort. So when we feel something uncomfortable, urgency comes in. I want to get out of this as fast as possible. And so we do a behavior in action to try and move us through it. That gives us maybe a short term relief, but then the cycle continues. Right. And so instead, being able to even witness ourselves being okay and sitting in that emotion for a moment, again, going back to the confidence we can then feel in ourselves to be able to respond instead of react or choose differently next time.
You're speaking our language. And that has honestly been, yeah, that has been so much of my personal journey too, is that discomfort's not going to kill us. Actually, Amanda, I'm really curious your thoughts on this, but Marissa and I talk a lot about our luteal phase. It's when you feel everything so deeply. And I think this is related. There's a lot of discomfort in your luteal phase or really strong signals of like, whoa, all of a sudden this thing that was like 10% of a problem feels like a 90% problem. This big escalation. And for so long, I was like, I'm too much. I'm too emotional during my luteal phase. I'm too much of a feeler. I'm too sensitive. And then I read something or someone shared something with me a while ago that your luteal phase is actually when you connect the deepest to your intuition and that you're not creating problems out of nowhere, but you're feeling things more deeply and maybe receiving messages that you would have otherwise brushed over. So this is related to the talk of discomfort, but I actually
Yeah.
really ask you this. If you find that your luteal phase is actually a very intuitive window in our cycle.
Totally. And I will say, I mean, I can like geek out on the biology of what's happening here because I think it's fascinating. But I was actually just explaining this to Jeannie. But basically, if you look at our cycle, and let's say we look at it from our period until ovulation, and I'm just going to call that follicular, and then ovulation until our period, and that's luteal. Okay. So that first half of our cycle, our estrogen is rising, our FSH and LH are rising, our testosterone is rising. The entire evolutionary intention of our body, this is again evolutionarily. There are a lot of other things to say about this day to day, but evolutionarily, our body is primed to try and find a mate, to try and find a partner, to then get pregnant by ovulation, right? Which means everything that's happening in our body is towards that intention, meaning it's going to give us more energy, more determination, more focus, more drive, heightened sense of smell because we want to smell a really good partner and we're attracted to his pheromones. Our appetite is slightly lower because we don't need to eat as much because our energy is going towards something else. Like there are all these things that are happening, which is why so many women feel bouncy and energetic and maybe more confident and sensual in that follicular phase, in that phase leading up to ovulation. Then ovulation to our period, that luteal phase, has a completely different intention in our bodies, right? Our body is trying to see if we are pregnant. And if it's pregnant, it wants to make sure we are protecting that potential life as much as possible. So whether someone's pregnant or not is irrelevant to the body. It is still under this, we must protect, which means our tolerance to BS, our tolerance to stress, to people that are not in alignment with us, the situations that bring us our nervous system dysregulation, all of these things, it is so much more heightened because your body's like, we don't need this right now. We need to rest. We need to relax. We need to decompress. Again, through the lens of if there's a potential baby here, we need to make sure we're protecting it and that we are taking care. But the way that we then experience it as women day to day is in our luteal phase, we have a higher metabolic demand. We quite literally need more calories during our luteal phase. We are more tired because progesterone can make us sleepy. We are lower VO2 max, which means we get winded faster and we can't do strenuous exercise. But the issue is that we are pushing up against that constantly because we're not aware of that. We're not tuning into that. And so we still go to the HIIT class and we still overexert ourselves and we think that we should be eating the same amount as we did 2 weeks ago because why we need more food now? And everything we're doing is further depleting and pushing up against our body's natural state at that time, which can lead to also irritability and frustration and exhaustion. So there's that piece. Coupled with the fact that our our tolerance to stress during that time is much lower, which I love that you use the word intuition there because I think it's such a beautiful reframe of that in the sense that we are more aware of what does not serve us. Our body is not, our mind, our body, our energy is not going to put up with things that are not in alignment for us. And so I think we can really say that in some ways as intuition, that we have a deeper knowing and connection now to what is aligned, what we want to put our energy to, what makes us feel safe and supported and at ease, and what doesn't.
I just got so excited when you were talking because I used to think that my luteal phase was such a problem. And what I realized was actually a lot of my life was the problem. I was not happy in my job. There were very real issues in some of my personal life that needed to be looked at. And instead, I was just like, this whole phase of the month, I am really unsatisfied and I'm crazy and I'm having all these thoughts and it's my luteal phase's fault. But actually, over time, I've learned like to really befriend it. And that's why Annie was saying we talk about it a lot because if you treat your luteal phase as what you said, your body actually literally looking out for you and protecting you, it is you can take those messages and you don't need to react. You don't need to like them the full reaction of what maybe you want to do in that moment. But taking those and thinking about those and taking them seriously and not letting yourself or others write you off as maybe crazy or over dramatic, because a lot of that stuff is literally the sign that you're living out of alignment with yourself.
Completely, completely agree. And as women, we have been, I think Annie, you said this too, we have just been labeled everything in the book. And whether it's too much in all the ways, or whether it's we're dramatic or we're closed off or we're a bitch, like whatever word you want to put there. We've had so many labels cast onto us that makes us pathologize ourselves and our bodies instead of really learning to sit in and think, okay, like what is this telling me right now? If I really zoom out and look at what I'm feeling, look at my environment and looking at my environment and my day to day, what can I learn about myself here? Rather than assuming, oh, I must be this thing because they said I am.
Such an important reframe. And I think just also giving ourselves grace to move through the different seasons of our cycle every month and not feel this pressure to operate as the same person. You actually said this once in one of your posts. I forget which one it was, but you also mentioned, well, then don't fall so far to the other extreme of that my luteal phase or that my period is like the excuse to binge on ice cream and lay in bed all day. There's this like beautiful middle ground of your luteal phase and your period might be the time to get fresh air and go for a really long
Mhm.
walk and not do the hit class and do more introspective work. But again, it's like not that. I think you do a really beautiful way of explaining and guiding women in that. If it's not these polarizing extremes, but the truth often lies somewhere in the middle. And we have to it's
Completely.
hard for our brains to the middle ground doesn't feel as safe for some reason, like extremes almost feel more productive. But that's what I appreciate so much about your content is it's a really beautiful
Yeah.
middle ground, I feel.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And I will say I've operated in both extremes. So I really can relate to the desire to be there. And I think you said it well too. Extremes almost like breed a certain sense of false sense of security or safety. Right? It makes us feel like we have an answer, we have a plan, like we have a script we can follow, and we kind of put ourselves in that bucket. But for most of us, the true answer of self understanding, of alignment, of ease and health is in the gray. And the gray can be harder to find and it can feel a little unclear sometimes. And that can feel uncomfortable. And going back to our conversation around knowing that discomfort doesn't mean something is bad is also an important thing to keep in mind.
Absolutely. Amanda, you are incredible. We are two of your biggest fans, truly, truly, truly. And we so appreciate you coming on and chatting with us today.
Thank you, Cal.
You could leave the audience with, I guess I'm gonna have two questions for you. One, what does well mean to you today? And what is one of your favorite healing and self-care rituals for your hormones?
For your hormones, I would have to think about both of these. What does well mean to me today? I think well or wellness to me right now just means being really at ease. And I think that can feel boring sometimes, or it doesn't feel again as sexy or exciting or whatever it may be. But I think being able to really find ease in your body, to find ease in your mental state and your emotions, to find ease in your relationships, to almost just like be able to let go and take a breath and really sink into your environment, your situation. That to me is what it means to be well right now. In terms of a ritual that helps my hormones in particular,
On healing rituals, and it could be fertility related.
those are different. It's probably gonna sound corny, but bear with me. Honestly, like hugging someone, which sounds maybe really silly and a little unexpected, but I think that we've also really discredited the power of connection and touch. And I think for my nervous system, for hormones, for fertility, being able to really connect with someone in that way, to feel safe enough to have your body like pressed up against theirs in an embrace and not feel like awkward to let go right away, but really sit into that, I think can be really, really therapeutic and nurturing. And if you don't have a significant other or a friend or family member nearby, like a dog, like I will hug my dog so hard, just be like, just stay with me here for a minute. It can be, yeah, a beautiful little intentional moment of like, I'm doing this for me.
I love that.
I think so. I wasn't sure how you guys were going to think about
No,
it.
I'm such a physical touch person that, yeah, it's really powerful.
I sometimes, if I can't get like a hug, I will use a weighted blanket literally to like mimic the feeling of that, you know? Yeah, it's our systems react so well to that.
And where can everyone find you, Amanda?
Instagram, Roots to Leaves. And then I have a website too for anyone who is looking to dive deeper into their hormones, their health, at rootstoleaves.com. So yeah, DM me, email me.
Yay. Thank you so much for coming on, and we will chat with you soon.
Yes, talk soon.
If something in today's conversation resonated with you, take a moment to pause and notice where it's sitting within you.
Living in alignment is not about fixing yourself or becoming someone new. It's about listening, trusting, and slowly coming home to who you already are.
Thank you for spending this time with us and for being part of this community.
If you enjoyed this episode, you can subscribe, leave a review, or share it with someone who might resonate with it too. See you next time.